This was an idea that literally just came to me at random. I have no idea how this video is going to go. I don't even really have like an overarching theme or concept to the video. I literally just wrote down some stuff and said, maybe this will make a fun video. So, we're going to try it out. If I end up feeling like it's a fun video, I'm going to obviously upload it and you'll see it as you're seeing it right now. If not, I'll delete it. I don't know why I'm saying this part. If it's up, you'll see it. If it's not, you won't see it. Either way. Welcome back to I Want to Talk About, the series where I take a topic, I sit on camera, and I blabber about it. And today, heavy emphasis on the blabbering part, because as you can tell from the title today, I want to talk about some of my favorite cartoons and TV shows that I loved growing up. Again, I don't even really have like a theme to all of this. There's no real like, oh my god, this is what the message of the video is. It's literally just me sitting on camera and yapping about TV shows and cartoons that I used to love. Maybe just invoking some nostalgia for some of you guys as well. For those that don't know, I was born in 1998. I'm 27 now, so I grew up in the 2000s, and I'm not going to talk so much about like, oh, I grew up in the golden age of such and such, because the thing about saying something was the golden age is you're always going to call something that was your childhood the golden age because it's the era that you have the most memories and attachment to, so it's sentimental to you. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh yeah, the 2000s were the golden age of television. I mean, to me they might have been, but equally, I think that every era has good and bad to it. It's just whether you're willing to open your mind and heart to the good. With that said, growing up in the 2000s, I got to watch a lot of really, really good shows that I have a lot of fond memories with. I've always said, and again, I'm not trying to get existential here, promise, but the first time that I realized I was truly conscious was 2002 when I was 4 years old. That was when I was first actually able to like see things and be like, yes, I'm alive, this is the thing in front of me, yada yada yada. So my earliest memories as far as watching TV when I was younger, I don't watch a ton of TV now, but you know, when I was younger I watched a lot, of course. Cartoons and stuff were big in the house, and my earliest memories with watching TV were on Playhouse Disney. I know it's not called that anymore. I think it's called like, I don't know what it's called. Disney Junior, I think is the name now, but Playhouse Disney was the thing that I watched a lot of when I was a kid. When it came to the shows that I really liked, again, I just literally, I don't have a huge script. I just wrote down a bunch of shows, and I'll just kind of like see where the wind takes me. But obviously the big one with Playhouse Disney back in the day was Bear in the Big Blue House. I feel like this is probably one of like the first shows that a lot of you guys think of when you think of Playhouse Disney, and this was one that I really enjoyed a lot. I also don't have a ton of memories with it, but I do know that I did watch some PB&J Otter when I was younger. I don't know how many of you remember this show, but I do remember enjoying it. And of course, another show that I feel like you can't talk about Playhouse Disney without mentioning is Roly Poly Oly. I mean, this show had like one of the greatest theme songs in the history of children's or family television. And again, the show itself was really fun too. Again, very well-meaning and very nice for a young audience. Also was a pretty big fan of The Book of Pooh. I think I did watch The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh a little bit, but really The Book of Pooh was the Pooh show that I remember the most. As a kid, of course, I loved Winnie the Pooh. I feel like Winnie the Pooh is one of those franchises that's like easy to love because it just is so kind and gentle and charming. And The Book of Pooh is still a show that I quote sometimes with my brother because there's an episode where the characters all want to do something different, but they don't know what to do. So the narrator is trying to make something up, and he's like, Pooh was, let's see, what was Pooh doing? He was, bouncing. Yes, he was bouncing. It's just, like, kind of ridiculous, but, you know, I like that style of humor, as you'll see as we get into some of the other shows here. One of the other ones that I remember quite a bit was Stanley. This was a really sweet show. It was a kid who, basically could, like, talk to animals and things like that, so that was really cool, and I always remember being really hooked on the thing that he had was the Great Big Book of Everything that basically had all the information about it, and there was the song that some of the other characters sang. The Great Big Book of Everything with everything inside. See the world around us. This book's a perfect guide. That was really, really sweet. Also, I had this here for Playhouse Disney. I don't actually remember if it was on Playhouse Disney or not, but I mean, I feel like if you were a kid, it didn't have to be in the 2000s. I feel like most of you probably have watched some of The Wiggles, or you know something about The Wiggles. I mean, This show, I think, was popular among, like, you know, like, family friends, so I saw it if I was ever, like, at a family friend's house or something like that. But, of course, you know, the Wiggles, they're iconic. Fruit Salad is one of the greatest songs in human history. That was a pretty fun one. This was a show that I think is super underrated that I still go back to a lot. I don't know if any of you remember it. I hope one of you watching does. But when I was a kid, and even now, I've always been a huge fan of The Adventures of Spot. I know this was a show that also had, like, a UK version, so maybe if you are from UK, you probably recognize it. But here in America, we got, like, an American dub, which I still like the American dub a lot. I actually personally kind of preferred it a little bit. Maybe it's just because what I grew up with. But yes, this show also had a very elite theme song that was super nice. And yeah, it was just a really sweet... I really liked a lot of shows, as you could tell, that were, like, very gentle, very sweet, very, you know, not a whole lot going on. And Spot, I think I just fell in love with because I'm a big dog person. I love dogs. So a puppy dog was everything to me. And yeah, I think the show was just so charming, and I really fell in love with a lot of the characters. Not just Spot, but like Steve the monkey, I also loved him. He was really fun. I had a lot of VHS tapes of The Adventures of Spot back in the day. I used to love watching this show. Still do. I go back to it sometimes, and it's just as fun. Again, very lighthearted and fun and cute, and it's a really, really good one. And while this one came out a little bit later when I was older, with younger cousins, I do have a few memories of watching the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, which was actually pretty fun. Again, educational without feeling like patronizing. Obviously, characters like Mickey, Donald, and Goofy, it's hard to do them wrong, and the show doesn't do them wrong. And it was a pretty fun show where I was like, yeah, I could sit and watch this with my younger cousins and enjoy it. And I know it just got a new series, I think. It was like Mickey Mouse Clubhouse Plus on Disney Plus, so that's cool. I'm glad to see that make a return. So Playhouse Disney was awesome, but of course, as a little kid, I loved Nick Jr. I remember, obviously, very distinctly their mascot, Face. I don't know if any of you remember Face, but he'd always come in and be like, "Hi there, Face here." And when he was about to introduce a new show, he would be like, "Right here on Nick Jr. Burr, burr, burr." I loved Face. And when it came to actual Nick Jr. shows, one of my absolute favorite, actually. One of my favorite shows, period. And probably, again, to many of you, one of the first shows that you think of when you think of Nick Jr. I mentioned dogs earlier, obviously a big dog person, so it will come as no surprise when I say that my favorite Nick Jr. show was obviously Blue's Clues. Blue's Clues was the best. This, again, even going back to it, this is one of those shows that I think, weirdly enough, is funnier to go back to when you're an adult than it is when you're a kid. And not because it's like, oh, there's innuendos or anything like that. It's just more like, for someone like me who really likes kind of absurd, goofy humor, there are some moments in this show that are, like, absolutely weird. Like, when they're, I think it's literally the first episode, when they're trying to solve the clue of what Blue wants to do, and the clues are a cup, a cow, and a straw. So clearly the answer is Blue wants to drink some milk. But Steve, being as goofy as he is all like, "Do you think Blue wants to put the cow in a cup and slurp it up with a straw?" Like, Steve, what are you thinking? No, that's cannibalism. But yeah, it had a lot of those funny, goofy moments, but again, it was educational without being patronizing, which still makes it great to go back to today. And it's kind of fascinating looking back how that show kind of was a major push forward for things like sign language. These days, I feel like a lot of times when you watch certain things or you go places, you see a lot of people who speak sign language, and, you know, ASL is a much bigger part of society today. But back then, when Blue's Clues was around, I, as a kid, didn't even realize that that's what it was teaching people. But, you know, Steve would always go, like, "Thank you so much," and I think, I unfortunately don't know ASL. I want to learn it, but I think he, in one episode, would say, "Thank you so much for all your help today," and, you know, looking back, I'm like, wow, that's really cool that the show could, like, teach kids something like that. And it did get the spin-off Blue's Room, where Blue talked, and it was all, like, puppets and, you know, plushies or whatever. I know some people might not have been as crazy about that, or when Joe came into the picture instead of Steve, but I still liked those versions of the show, and I know it did get a newer version, Blue's Clues and You, which I watched like 1 or 2 episodes of. Josh was a great host. It makes me sad that the show recently got canceled, but Josh did a really, really good job, and from what I saw, I'm glad they still kept that, like, sign language part of it, because I did see, when I was younger, my favorite episode of Blue's Clues was the birthday episode, and they redid it in Blue's Clues and You, and I think at one part when Josh said birthday party or something, he went like this, so it was cool to me that they still kept that element around in the new show. And even if the show recently got canceled, it made me happy that, like, today's kids get to grow up with a version of Blue's Clues like the one that I grew up with. So that makes me very happy. Another show that you probably already think of when you think of Nick Jr. is obviously Dora the Explorer, and admittedly, I did watch some Dora when I was younger. I know this is a show that is easy to make fun of today, and if I'm being charitable, I mean, it had a good concept. I mean, the show being as unapologetically Spanish as it is was great as far as showing off culture and things like that, and I think teaching kids a second language is a pretty fantastic thing, especially back in the 2000s. The problem is that it's wrapped in probably the most patronizing show that you ever did see. We need to cross the red bridge. Do we cross the red bridge, the blue bridge, or the yellow bridge? And you're staring at the screen like, fucking, it was the first thing that you said! And while you're freaking out at your TV, Dora's staring at you with those big dead eyes, and it's quiet for like 10 seconds. And then like the little mouse cursor comes down and clicks on the red bridge like, Kirk! And then Dora's all like, great job! And you're like, I didn't fucking do anything! Yeah, I'm sorry, I had to crash out about Dora the Explorer because, oh god, like, going back to watch that show in any capacity will drive you insane. I mean, I know I'm getting ahead of myself by bringing up a show that I'm going to talk about a little later, but I think another character on another Nickelodeon show can very perfectly describe how I feel about Dora the Explorer, so I'm gonna let him do the talking.
Come on, Dora, it's right over there! Obre los ojos! Come on! Come on, Dora! Andale, mas rápido! You call yourself an explorer? Come on, Dora! You're the one with the map! Don't ask me! Come on, Dora! It's right behind you!
Yeah. Thank you, Crazy Steve. So yeah, Dora, good idea, super tough execution. But as far as other shows I watched a lot on Nick Jr., I was a fan of Oswald. This was another show that was very gentle and sweet and charming. I thought it had some great characters too. I loved that his dog was a literal hot dog, and his name was Weenie. Like, I don't know why, that was just really funny to me. And he had a friend named Henry who was a penguin, and Daisy who was a flower. It's a sweet show, very nice. And another big one was Max and Ruby, which I watched some of when I was a kid. I did enjoy it, even though I stand by it that Ruby was actually not a very good sister. Not literally, because I know that Max, to a lot of people, is probably a little piece of shit, but there's one episode that makes me think that Ruby was not a good sister. And it was an episode where it was called, like, Max's Breakfast, and he really wanted to have a strawberry for breakfast, but Ruby was like, no, you have to eat your eggs. And, look, I understand it. Eggs are good for you, and I like to eat eggs. I think they're quite good. But it's not like he was asking for chocolate for breakfast. A strawberry is healthy, too. Like, that you could just tell him, like, hey, sure, you can have a strawberry. Like, let him have the strawberry first. Is it that big a deal? But yeah, it was a pretty decent show, although I obviously wasn't watching Nick Jr. as an adult, but I know the show went on a pretty long time. And one of the things about Max that I always remember is that he only ever spoke like one-word sentences, but by the end of the show, he was speaking in full sentences. That's really something. Also in Nick Jr., I did watch some Little Bear back in the day, which I thought was a nice show, and Franklin, which I also thought was very sweet. Okay, look, I know he's done some very reprehensible things, but I did watch the show when I was younger, and I thought it was good. Moving on. Also, one thing that I remember from Nick Jr. that actually as a kid scared me, but growing up I ended up really enjoying, was one of their short little interstitial shows, kind of like how Spot was interstitial for Playhouse Disney. Nick Jr. had a little short thing that they would do, and it was called Ambidexter. And when I was younger, for some reason, it kind of creeped me out. I don't know why. I think I just thought Ambi and Dexter's characters looked kind of creepy. But going back to it as an adult, I think it's actually a really smart show. Because the whole idea of it is that the two characters, Ambi and Dexter, were actually like the physical embodiments of two hands. And obviously being called Ambi and Dexter, it played off the idea of ambidextrous, being able to use both hands. But also, it had a pretty neat concept because Dexter, as a character, was someone who during the shows would want to do things a lot more practically, whereas Ambi was much more creative. I could be getting the hands wrong here, so I apologize if this is the way that it's wrong, but Dexter was the left hand and Ambi was the right hand. So Dexter was more of a left-brained person, Ambi was more right-brained. Left-brained people look more into practicality in different situations, while right-brained people prefer to solve things more creatively. It was actually a really unique show. I think as a kid I just got a little creeped out by it at some times, but in hindsight it's super clever. Crazy that it was just a little short thing that popped up on Nick Jr. once or twice, but it was good. I really liked it. And then of course when it comes to little kid networks, of course I watched quite a bit of PBS Kids, which it really is such a shame what's happening to PBS now and how the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is being defunded and all this stuff. I don't want to get too deep into politics in this particular video given that we're talking about shows from my childhood, but it is pretty damn gross what's happening around there right now. But either way, at risk of an awkward transition, PBS Kids had a lot of shows I actually remember watching when I was a kid. More than I realized. I didn't realize how much of what I watched as a kid was on PBS Kids. Of course, the big one was Sesame Street. I feel like a lot of people can say they've watched Sesame Street, whether you are a kid now, a kid then, a kid way before I was. Sesame Street's had an enduring legacy, man, and obviously the characters are iconic. Obviously, as a kid, I loved Elmo's world, and Elmo is still the homie. I mean, I see what he tweets, and it's still genius. Like, Elmo is, again, another character who I think is funnier to me as an adult than when I was a kid. Like, I've also seen him in, like, media appearances and, like, interviews and stuff like that, and he's just a little chaos demon, and I love it. Also, to answer the long-asked question, the lifelong question, I also have never seen a rock eat a cookie. Sorry, but I think Rocco needs to know his role and shut his mouth. Of course, the other big one that I think a lot of people think of when they think of PBS Kids was Arthur, which I watched quite a bit, another show with a really elite theme song. It was kind of funny to me how this show kind of recently, and by that I mean, like, 10 years ago? Jesus Christ. Became like a meme all over again, but the memes still pop up and I still see it quite a bit. It's funny how that kind of thing happens, but I don't think it takes away from how good the show was. It was a really fun one, and I'm glad that it went on for as long as it did and got to have the conclusion that it eventually had. Also, I remember watching some Clifford the Big Red Dog. I feel like this is another show a lot of you guys probably have a lot of memories with. It wasn't like my most watched show, but Clifford was still quite fun. I also did watch some of the Magic School Bus, not at home. I remember watching episodes of the Magic School Bus when I was in school. It was like something they showed quite a bit, but I remember that being nice. And I feel like I watched Reading Rainbow like at least once or twice, and I remember enjoying it. Again, I just don't remember the show, but I feel like I watched it, but you don't have to take my word for it. Obviously, as a kid, I watched Barney. I feel like a lot of you guys did too. And as a kid, it was fun, but it's another one of those shows that, like, I watched it a bit when I was older just because I had, like, younger cousins who watched it, and dear God. Like, as a kid, you love it, but when I watched it as an adult, I wanted to rip my hair out. And my hair is something I absolutely love, so I would never want to rip this out, but that just goes to show you what Barney actually is. Also, as a kid, this is one of those shows I can't believe I was actually able to watch, but Teletubbies. Not because it was bad, but because Teletubbies is secretly like the creepiest kids show ever created. And actually, even as a kid, there were several parts of it that kind of unnerved me. Granted, as a kid, I was scared of literally everything. Not much has changed. Literally, I've had a lifelong fear of a Paramount VHS bumper that has given me nightmares in my adult life, so make of that what you will. But Teletubbies had this weird, just creepy vibe to it. I mean, yeah, there's the whole baby's face in the sun thing, which was something, I don't know, that was weird. But also, I remember when I was a kid, I always used to get, like, kind of nervous when the end of the Teletubbies intro would happen, because they would just go like, uh-oh, and then run away. And then once they run away, it would be, like, quiet for a minute, and that little, like, speaker thing in the show would, like, come up from the screen, like, and it would be like way too close to the camera, and you would just hear like,
Where have the Teletubbies gone?
And for some reason that always made me feel like on edge when I was a kid. And I also remember this one episode kind of creeping me out because like the Teletubbies were sleeping. I don't remember what they were supposed to be doing, but again, that speaker thing just came up and it started playing like a recording of like Frere Jacques, but it was like really, really dark sounding, and I was like, why is this happening in a show that is made for literal 2-year-olds? The audience that watches Teletubbies still has to be told not to put glue in their mouths. Why is this what we're giving them? I don't know, that show was weird. But as far as other PBS shows, I do remember watching some Zoom. It was like a game show of some kind from what I remember, and this was one that I know my brother was a big fan of too, so I have some memories with it. Also have some memories with Zaboomafoo. Again, shows with animals are a very easy sell to kids, so Zaboomafoo was a pretty cool one. Of course, as a kid, I also loved Dragon Tales. I wish with all my heart to fly with dragons in a land apart. That was a really fun show, and it was funded in part by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting through funds from the U.S. Department of Education. That literally played, I think, like, after every episode. I don't know if it was before or after, but as I was just saying that, I actually just got goosebumps. Like, that is burned into my memory just from watching so much Dragon Tales as a kid. Also remember watching Between the Lions, which is one of those shows that, like, kind of went away for a while, but, like, toward the end of the 2010s, like, at least on social media, I would see a lot of people posting those, like, hey, does anyone remember Between the Lions? It was a fun show. I think I remember the centerpiece of it was, like, literature. It was a lot about reading and stuff like that. That was really fun. And of course, a huge one here, Bob the Builder. I did love me some Bob the Builder when I was a kid. Actually, this is not about the show, but just, I guess, to demonstrate how much I did enjoy it. When I was a kid, I had, like, a Tupper box, like a big giant Tupperware type box of, like, Mega Bloks. If you remember Mega Bloks, they were basically, like, baby's version of Legos, essentially. And the Tupperware box thing that I had, like, a Mega Bloks, like, design on the front, and it had a male character and a female character. And when I was a kid, for some reason, I always used to call the guy Bob and the girl Wendy. I think it's just because I loved Bob the Builder so much, and Mega Bloks you built, so hey, I'm building stuff. I'm Bob the Builder here. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that show still goes on. It's probably had a couple different incarnations, and it's probably been on networks beyond just PBS Kids at this point. Bob the Builder is a pretty huge one. I did also watch some Thomas and Friends. I remember that show being weird, I think, just because as a kid I always thought like the claymation faces of Thomas and his friends were always a little weird, but hey, I know it's a super popular one. And also Curious George. I mostly watched, again, not a ton of it, but when I was a kid, I do remember watching some of like the OG Curious George, like from 1982. For some reason they were showing it in school, but I always did love it. Again, very gentle and serene, how I like my kid shows. Though, I did watch some episodes of, like, the later series, again, just thanks to younger cousins, and it was good. Again, Curious George is a pretty fun one. That reminds me, I need to rewatch the movie that came out back in, like, 2006, because I remember as a kid watching that Curious George movie and enjoying it, so I gotta see if I still do. But then we started getting into the big kids networks, and one that I didn't really watch a whole lot of was Disney Channel, actually. Or Toon Disney, or ABC Kids, or whichever one you wanted to call it, but we'll just say Disney Channel here. Weirdly enough, even though I do enjoy Disney, and I watch plenty of Disney movies, growing up I didn't really watch much Disney Channel, and I think the reason why is because I've talked about this in some videos before, not like in this series, but I've talked about it on camera. When I was a kid, you know, gender roles were a very real thing. You know, you go to McDonald's and they ask you, do you want a boy toy or a girl toy? You know, all that stuff about boys like this thing and girls like this thing. And I think for some reason I always just thought Disney Channel was a girls' network when I was like a little stupid kid. So because of that, I missed out on a lot of Disney Channel shows. Like, I literally wrote on my list some of the shows that I missed. Like, I didn't watch much Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, Tailspin, Goof Troop, DuckTales, Darkwing Duck, Gargoyles, Buzz Lightyear of Starkman, which is weird that I didn't watch that because I'm a big Pixar guy, The Proud Family, Kim Possible, American Dragon Jake Long, things like Even Stevens, Lizzie McGuire, That's So Raven, Hannah Montana. Like, I missed out on all that stuff because I think stupid little kid Matt was like, oh, Disney Channel's for girls. Same reason that even though I liked Disney as a kid, I didn't really watch like the princess movies. But there were a couple Disney shows that did slip through the cracks. When I was younger, I watched some House of Mouse, which I remember being pretty fun. It had a lot of cameos with other Disney characters. That was kind of the whole point of the show. And that was a really fun one. I also did watch some Lilo and Stitch, the series, because growing up I was obviously a huge fan of Lilo and Stitch. That was like the first Disney Animation Studios film I remember really watching as a kid. so I did enjoy the series. And to show how much of a fan of Stitch I was, I still have my Stitch stuffed animal that I got back in 2004 when I went to Disney World. And still in really good condition, too. This is, again, another show that I quote with my brother a bit, because there's one scene where Stitch is digging into the freezer, and he pulls out, like, a giant, like, rump roast, and he just goes, "Ooh, look at this! And it's just a really funny moment. Again, these kind of, like, dumb moments are the things that I find the funniest. Also, while I didn't really watch a ton of it, thanks again to just having younger cousins, I did watch some of Phineas and Ferb, and I do remember this being a really funny show, and it's a show I've come to appreciate now because it's gotten so many memes and things like that. If I had the patience for TV now and the ability to sit through multiple seasons, I would sit and watch all of Phineas and Ferb, just because from what I saw of it, it was a very funny show. Same thing with The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, which I did see quite a bit in passing when I was younger, and I did enjoy it. And another show that I appreciate more as I've gotten older because of all the memes. Like the "how do you lose a woman" scene, or of course my favorite and probably your favorite, but "would you like or Fim?" And again, because I had younger cousins who were absolutely obsessed with Selena Gomez, I did watch 1 or 2 episodes of Wizards of Waverly Place. I do remember enjoying it a little bit, but just I don't remember a ton of the show as it is. I just know that I watched it. No, when I was a kid, beyond Disney, I was more into things like Fox Kids. I don't know how many of you guys remember Fox Kids, but this was my network. And I kind of also included under this umbrella shows from like Kids WB and Jetix. These were like my networks when I was a kid. When it came to shows that premiered across these networks, obviously Power Rangers. I mean, I could probably do a video just on my experience with Power Rangers if I wanted to. I don't, but if I wanted to, I could just do a whole video talking about Power Rangers because Power Rangers was my franchise as a kid. Every Halloween I dressed as a new Power Ranger. I still know most of the morph sequences. When I was a kid, I watched I think when I was a kid, my first season was obviously like Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue. That was the first one I remember, but obviously I did, thanks to reruns, watch Mighty Morphin, Zeo, Turbo, Space, Lost Galaxy. But I watched those seasons up to Power Rangers Mystic Force. That was like the last one I really sat and watched. And I watched like occasional episodes of like Operation Overdrive or Jungle Fury. But I was kind of off the Power Rangers craze after that. The only time I came back was with like Megaforce and Super Megaforce because of the whole anniversary thing, but what a disappointment those seasons were. And then I watched Dino Charge just because I wanted to see if they would actually improve on Super Megaforce, which they did. But either way, yeah, Power Rangers has always been a big one for me. Of course, you know that I've done a lot of videos on video games, so you can probably assume this part. But yes, growing up, even though I didn't watch much anime, I did watch Pokemon quite a bit. Mostly like the early stuff, of course, but I watched up to about like Diamond and Pearl. I don't have the strongest memories with the anime compared to the video games, but of course I do remember them very well. Rather, I remember enjoying them a lot. And also, hot take, as much as the original Pokemon theme song is like the iconic one, it, to me, is not the best Pokemon theme song. Pokemon Johto, I think, was the best Pokemon theme song. And then, of course, given that they were around the same time and kind of compared to each other, I also did watch quite a bit of Digimon. Actually, as a kid, I think I was a bigger fan of Digimon than Pokemon for one reason or another. My Digimon experience largely stretched from Adventure 1 and 2, Tamers, and Frontiers. Frontiers was the last one I watched really in any capacity. Another series that had one of the best theme songs ever. But yeah, Digimon was one I was pretty obsessed with. I used to have a bunch of Digivices, I used to have some of the video games, and I used to have that card game, which I never knew how to play it, but the cards looked cool, I'll tell you that much. Another one, of course, I can't go without mentioning it, but yes, as a kid, I did watch Yu-Gi-Oh! A decent bit. Mostly just like the OG few seasons and maybe like an episode or two of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, and then I fell off the train. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a pretty cool one, and again, as a kid, I did do quite a bit of Yu-Gi-Oh! Dueling. I used to have like, not just the decks and like the duel mats, but I don't remember what it was called, that you guys are gonna know it, and I'm gonna have a picture on screen somewhere, but like that duel thing that you strap around your arm and you're like playing like this or whatever. That was a pretty fun little toy to have, and again, I did love Yu-Gi-Oh! Dueling back in the day. I think part of why I stopped, I still know quite a few people who Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel and, build decks. My brother's been really into Yu-Gi-Oh! Lately. He has been playing a lot of the video game Master Duel, and he also just started getting some physical cards. But I think Yu-Gi-Oh! I kind of fell off the train because they started just adding too many different card types. When I was a kid, it was monsters, it was spells, It was traps. I swore at one point the spells were called magic cards too. It was fusions, and it was occasionally ritual monsters, and I still barely knew how ritual monsters worked, but that was it. That's what there was. Now there's like synchros and XYZs and pendulums and P4Qs and whatever. Like, they're adding all these card types, and I'm like, what? Again, I watched my brother play Master Duel, and I'm like, I don't understand how you do any of this crap. Yu-Gi-Oh! Seemed a lot simpler back in the days, but still a fun show. And so was actually, this was one that I don't know if you guys remember super well, but I'm sure you do. When I was a kid, I did enjoy Beyblade. I was not much of an anime viewer, as you could tell, but I did enjoy anime that could sell me with toys, because, hey, I was a kid and I liked toys. And yes, when I was younger, because of Beyblade, because Beyblade seemed so cool, I did actually have one of those like Beyblade Arena type toys that you could use and you could let it rip and stuff like that. And I had several Beyblade like video games. I had one of those, I don't know if any of you remember it, but I had like one of those TV game controller things, but it was like a Yu-Gi-Oh thing where you could like actually let it rip for real. It was pretty cool. I remember enjoying it a lot when I was a kid. I did watch occasionally some Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. I didn't watch a ton of like Spider-Man cartoons growing up, even though Spider-Man is my favorite superhero. But I did watch some of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Definitely some really fun episodes. The one that I most remember vividly is when his friends were, I think, like, turned into, like, bugs because of Swarm, the villain, and they would be like, Swarm, Swarm! That was pretty fun. And I did watch occasionally some Kirby Right Back at Ya, just because, as a kid, I liked Kirby, but not a ton of it, although I do remember having some fun with the show. Same thing with Sonic X. Sonic X was a show I just had some fun with as, you know, a Sonic fan who really liked Sonic. But again, those shows I was more into the video games than the actual shows themselves. But man, Fox Kids, Kids WB, Jetix, those kind of networks had some really good shows. But I don't know if I'd say they were my favorite. I think my favorite would have to have been Cartoon Network. And by proxy, some of the Boomerang shows that they would show on there. Like, of course, as a kid, I watched plenty of Scooby-Doo. Specifically, like, of course, Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? But I also loved What's New Scooby-Doo, another Elite theme song, and even, like, a pup named Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo is just one of those franchises that I think is just, like, ever-present. It's one of those things that, like, it just never gets old. Yeah, there are some interpretations that aren't good, but, like, Scooby-Doo is still one of those things that, like, when something comes along, I'm kind of gonna be like, ooh, Scooby-Doo! Same thing with Looney Tunes. I did watch quite a bit of, like, the OG Looney Tunes, or whatever they would show of Looney Tunes, but also Baby Looney Tunes. Those shows, I think, just have so many iconic characters that, again, it's hard to really mess them up. I know you can, you don't have to remind me, but most of the time, it's hard to mess them up. Similar thing with, like, Tom and Jerry. Tom and Jerry was a really, really fun show. Obviously super duper chaotic, and another one of those shows that, like, just, it feels like even after all this time, they still find new ways to make it fun. So I always appreciate that. And growing up, as far as Boomerang stuff, I did watch some Flintstones, still do now. Actually, another show that I think has withstood time pretty well, even though I know that there are some new interpretations they've tried to do to it, new interpretations that aren't quite as good, but the original still holds up. Cartoon Network also had some superhero shows, and I didn't watch like a ton of them, but I do remember watching some of like the original Justice League show, which I remember thinking was super badass. Of course, as a kid, I did watch some Teen Titans. This was a huge one when I was younger. Again, not that I have the most experience with it, but I remember it being really cool. Always was a fan of Beast Boy. It does help that Greg Sipes is one of my favorite voice actors. And I also remember watching some Crypto the Superdog. Do you guys remember this one? Glad to see he showed up in that new Superman movie. I haven't seen it yet, but I've seen him in the trailer, so I'm glad that Crypto's there. But yeah, Cartoon Network, the other shows that they had were some real bangers. I mean, Dexter's Laboratory was really crazy. This was a fun one. A lot of memories watching this one. In some ways, it feels like it shouldn't have worked because Dexter is a pretentious twat and Dee Dee was just annoying as hell. And then Mandark was Mandark. But the show still found ways to be funny. Oh, and do you remember that episode that was banned because they cursed? That was a weird one. There was also Johnny Bravo, which is another one I quote with my brother quite a bit. Again, Johnny Bravo. Another thing where, like, he's a character you shouldn't like, but you kind of do. And he's fun to impersonate, too, because, man, I'm pretty. I also didn't watch it a ton, but Cow and Chicken is another show I remember from when I was younger, and that show was weird. Even as a kid, I remember being weirded out by that show. And as a kid, I was not hard to impress, so that should tell you everything you need to know. But as a kid, I also watched the Powerpuff Girls. This was one of those shows where it was like, as a guy, as a boy, I never wanted to admit I watched it, but I did. These girls were pretty badass. And Mojo Jojo was a really, really funny villain. I must stop them. But first, I must attend to the dishes that I have soiled with the food that I've eaten. And I know they've brought it back in some form, some good, some you know. But I'm glad the show does endure and that it's still popular now. Of course, my favorite Cartoon Network show and one of my favorite cartoons, just point blank period, I've always been a fan of Ed, Edd n Eddy, and I feel like this show is the big reason why I've become such a fan of absurd humor, because it is a show that is total nonsense. It is goofy humor, it is dumb humor, but it is why I love it, especially because of Ed. Eddie is my ideal pal. Soft and cuddly like mashed potatoes. Yum. Again, another one of those shows that, like, as a kid, I just always thought was goofy, but now as I've gotten older, I'm like, oh my god, it's hilarious. Like, I can't stop going back to it. And also, I do love the show for how it was so gleefully willing to just break the fourth wall all the time. On the exact flip side, we had Courage the Cowardly Dog, which a lot of people always talked about this being, like, one of the scariest shows that a kid could watch. And in hindsight, yeah, but when I was a kid, for some reason, I was not really, like, bothered by the show. I know that's really weird. Of all the things I was scared of as a kid, Courage wasn't one of them. If anything, what scared me more was the company logo at the end for Stretch Films, the people that made this. Again, I'm a big logo guy. And at the ending of the credits were already kind of creepier to me because of all that, like, weird music and, like, the... But then after the credits are over, it's just a mouth. And then the mouth just goes... That creeped me out as a kid way more than the actual show itself. But in hindsight, the show was creepy. The frickin' Flam-Tassie Flam guy who I guess, like, hypnotized everyone with, like, flan. And then everyone knows, of course, about things like Le Quack or Return the Slab. In hindsight, yeah, freaky show. It's just weird that as a kid it didn't freak me out quite as much. Samurai Jack was also a really good one. I know that was a sudden jump, but yeah, Samurai Jack was super cool, very badass. I only just found out, like literally yesterday, that the theme song for this show was actually sang by will.i.am, which in hindsight, yeah, now I hear it, but yeah, this was a cool one. A lot of action. Definitely one of those, like, first shows I watched as a kid that made me go like, ooh, cool, action! Codename Kids Next Door was great. A lot of good memories with episodes from this one. Like going to the Mountain of the 37 Flavors. There was an episode where they were, like, eating nachos, and for some reason there's one part that, like, plays in my head rent-free for no reason, but, like, I think number 5 had something, like, under her hat that was, like, messing with her, and, like, the other members are trying to get her to, like, eat some of the chips and cheese, and number 2 just goes like, oh, come on, number 5. Have some cheese! And for some reason, like, that sticks with me, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I'm weird. Who's to say? Also really like The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. I don't remember much about, like, I think this spawned from a show called Grim and Evil, and there was also, like, a spin-off to that called Evil Con Carne. I don't remember those as well, but Grim Adventures and Billy and Mandy was one of the ones I watched the most as a kid. Again, Billy was absolutely nuts. How many times have one of us yelled, "Destroy us all!" from him? And there's one moment that always plays in my head from Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy where Grim is talking about how humans are always picking their noses in their cars. And that was something that as a kid I always thought of, because there would be a lot of times where I'd be, like, driving to family's house, and it felt like once every drive up we would see someone in their car picking their nose. So every time it happened I was like, wow, Grim is 100% correct. These people just always pick their noses in their cars. There was also Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, which also had some really, really good characters. I think the episode I most remember vividly was, there was, like, a party where Mac, who was the one human in the show, some kind of, like, sugary beverage landed on his tongue, and it led him into a massive sugar rush. Like, that was a crazy freaking episode. And then there was Cheese. He liked cereal. And he liked chocolate milk. That was a fun one. Camp Lazlo was one I also had some good memories with. Clam was my favorite character in the show. He always just said one word at a time, but it was always funny just because comedic timing and all. I also remember Ben 10 being a really popular one, and I did watch this, like, a little bit as a kid. I also remember having, what do they call his watch? The Omnitrix, I think it's called? Excuse me, it was called the Omnitrix. But I remember having one of those toys as a kid, and I remember that thing being pretty cool. And then there was also Chowder, which is probably the last big Cartoon Network show I remember watching. And this one, I think as a kid, I always thought was super funny. And, mostly it's just, I guess, food that did it, I guess. But growing up, it's, again, another one of those shows that I've enjoyed more as an adult because it is just so filled with fourth wall breaks and it's so self-aware and stuff. I just think that's amazing. I like shows like that. Oh, and this is a Cartoon Network thing I'm really only going to be mentioning just to see if anyone remembers it. Does anyone remember Reanimated and the TV show that spawned from it, Out of Jimmy's Head? Because if you do, I'm sorry, and you might be entitled to financial compensation. Not from me, but from someone. Oh, and while I never watched it, Code Lyoko has one of the greatest theme songs ever created, point blank period. Just saying. But of course, the last network that I'll talk about in this video, I can't go without talking about Nickelodeon, because even though Cartoon Network has been my favorite, Nickelodeon was the one I think I watched longer, because I did watch Nickelodeon more into like my high school years, and pay no mind to the fact that I couldn't get into Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'm sorry, I just couldn't. I don't know why. I mean, I appreciate the show and I respect it, it's just not one that I can go back to. But Nickelodeon has plenty of shows that I could go back to. SpongeBob is obviously the most iconic. This is one of those shows that I know a lot of people talk about, like, dipping in quality and stuff like that, and yeah, there are some episodes that are a little bit gross, but like, even some of like, the post-movie SpongeBob, I still find some humor in. Again, really it's those like first 3 seasons or so that are truly the best. But to me, it's not like that's all there is. It's just that that happens to be the best of it. But yeah, SpongeBob's still one of those shows that like if you turn it on, chances are I'll sit and watch it. I still have to see the other movies though, because I saw the original SpongeBob movie and that one was awesome, but I don't know anything about the other ones really. I've seen like trailers, but I haven't seen the actual movies, and I feel like I probably should. Also, one that I think as a kid I might have liked even more was The Fairly Odd Parents. This was always one of my all-time favorites, and I actually, a couple years ago when it came to Netflix, at least the first few seasons came to Netflix, I would kind of leave it on as background noise because I just loved those first few seasons so much. This one I will say though, did have quite a dip in quality at a point, and I don't think it was like immediate. Because, you know, we had the Channel Chasers movie, which was the best shit ever. Channel Chasers is like the best Fairly Odd Parents episode or movie or whatever, period. But then Poof, the baby, was introduced, and I don't think the show was bad when Poof came in. It was still fine. It was when Sparky the dog came in that really it kind of went downhill for me. By the time they added the other characters in, I just was like, okay, well, we're done here. And then they changed it to like lazy-looking Flash animation, and I was like, okay, this show really went downhill. But the originals are still great, and they're awesome to go back to, even though they could be hard to grapple with because of the fact that Timmy Turner's dad is a pedophile. Another one of my all-time favorites, this was like my top 3 along with Ed, Edd n Eddy and another show we'll mention, but Jimmy Neutron. I know this show has gotten, you know, its takes over the years, and I know that the animation is kind of a fun thing to harp on, but I always loved Jimmy Neutron. I thought it was super funny. I loved the characters, specifically Sheen and Carl, even though obviously I am one of many who will tell you they should not have made a spin-off with Sheen. Or rather, if they did, it shouldn't have been whatever Planet Sheen was. But this show was super fun. I also love the original movie, of course, Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius. And I wouldn't be opposed to seeing this come back in some way, even though DNA Productions is gone. Hi, I'm Paul. But then the other one that I mentioned was in my top 3 was Rugrats, and this is another one of those Nick shows that's like one of the first things you think of when you think of Nickelodeon. Always super fun, another one that I quote all the time with my brother because the characters in this show were just awesome. This is another one that I know a lot of people talk about having like a sharp decline at a point. I don't think it was like super sharp, but obviously the original stuff was the best. To me, I think one of my favorite Rugrats things in general was Rugrats in Paris the movie. Really, really fun animated movie, one that I still love going back to now. And I know that it got the spin-off All Grown Up, or the sequel series rather, and some might not be as crazy about it compared to the original, but I do still think it's quite fun. Although I didn't check out that revival that they did, the 2021 like reboot of it, but if anything else, I was just glad to see that it existed and that Klasky Chupo was still doing some stuff. Hey Arnold was also a great show, another one that I watched quite a bit, like in my high school years, because they had that 90s are all that thing that they used to do late at night, so I would watch it late at night, and that show was really fun, had some really good characters and great storylines to it as well. Kind of dark actually as well, so a lot of adult themes there. Cat Dog was a very, very weird one, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. Another one that watching it on the 90s or all that I always thought was really weird, but it still was one that definitely got a good laugh out of me here and there. Rocket Power always felt like a pretty badass one. Again, being a kid in the 2000s, skateboarding was a really huge thing, just extreme sports in general, so having a show centered around that was pretty dope. I also did watch some of the Wild Thornberrys when I was a kid. Maybe not as frequently, but it still had a really cool concept because of, you know, the main character being able to talk to animals. And obviously, I will be one of many that will tell you that Nigel Thornberry is the hero of all time, and that Tim Curry is a legend among legends. Point blank, period. Not just because of Nigel Thornberry. Tim Curry is just a legend, period. Rocko's Modern Life was also one I watched more than a few episodes of, which is kind of surprising because subject matter-wise, I feel like I shouldn't have been able to watch it. It was a show about a literal phone sex operator, but it was still fun. I still kind of enjoyed the show. Also really liked Chalk Zone, which had a pretty cool concept. A kid who could basically, like, enter a world where he could use chalk to just create whatever the hell he wanted. That was pretty awesome, and the theme song was incredibly awesome. I have some good memories with My Life as a Teenage Robot. That was a pretty fun one. I'm trying to run through a couple of these because I know we've been here for a while, but My Life as a Teenage Robot had some really cool characters too. Danny Phantom was a pretty badass one. I do have some good memories watching this show. Even if I don't remember a ton of the show, there are still moments of it that I do remember. Backwash. Also had some fun with Catch Scratch, even though its creator is, these days. But yeah, this one had some pretty absurd humor that I did really enjoy. I love that these cats were also really addicted to root beer for some reason. This is another one that I think if you remember it, you are entitled to financial compensation, but as a kid, I actually really liked Mr. Meaty. Going back to it now, I don't. This show is absolutely bizarre and really creepy and really weird, but as a kid, for some reason, I don't know, I was unfazed. Now I look at it and I'm like, what happened here? Why? Although one show I will defend was Back at the Barnyard, because I know it's probably not like the most high quality show Nickelodeon has put out or anything like that, but it's funny. It's dumb, it's funny, Pig is amazing, Dr. Pig, might I add. And it's one of those shows that I think just has so many stupid moments that just really make me laugh for some reason. I don't know. It's really fun. I'm glad it became like a bit of a meme for a while too, because I feel like the show was kind of destined for that. Even as I got into like middle school and eventually high school, I did watch some of the other shows that came to Nickelodeon, like The Penguins of Madagascar, although that was more just because I've always enjoyed the Madagascar films. Although again, I do think this was a pretty fun show. Getting to see King Julian, that by itself was also great because King Julian is just also a chaos demon. And also, this show made me realize that Mort pretty much normalized foot fetishes before this world of foot fetishing that we live in today. Also, I remember watching some Tough Puppy when I was younger, which actually was pretty funny. I think that was really also because, if I'm remembering correctly, Tough Puppy, or Dudley Puppy as he was called, was voiced by Jerry Trainer, who, you know, he's incredible, so that just made it a little extra funny. Also, as a kid, I did watch some Kung Fu Panda Legends of Awesomeness, again, just because I enjoyed the Kung Fu Panda films. And again, I can't pretend there aren't some moments from the show that I think of a lot. I mean, the dude who played Poe, I don't remember who it was, but if you hadn't told me, I wouldn't have thought it wasn't Jack Black when I was a kid. He did a pretty good job with it. I also haven't mentioned this franchise much, even though it's had many different shows, but I did also watch the 2012 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles show when I was younger. That was a really good Ninja Turtles show. Again, I don't have like the most experience with the Ninja Turtles, but I do enjoy some of the stuff that I see of them, and this one was actually pretty cool. Great voice acting, I liked a lot of the characters here. A lot of badass action, the animation was cool. It was a pretty fun one. And then the last real cartoon that I watched was Sanjay and Craig, which was a little bit gross at some points. There were definitely some weird moments, but it was at least pretty quality. I mean, there was a point in time where I was entering middle school, maybe like late high school, where maybe just because people were getting older, I was hearing the talk about, like, Nickelodeon doesn't have it anymore. But Sanjay and Craig was kind of proof to me that they still did. And then as far as live action shows, I know a lot of these shows are like a little hard to go back to now, given some of the people involved in them. But they're shows I could still go back to and enjoy. I did, as a kid, watch quite a bit of The Amanda Show, which had some really, really fun sketches to it, some weird ones. Again, some that might be a little hard to go back to these days, but it was a show that I found pretty funny. I think I remember Moody's Point pretty vividly. That little sketch thing that they did was kind of weird, but kind of funny that they tried to be a little emotionally dramatic there. My favorite, though, has probably always been Drake and Josh. I know I referenced it earlier, but Drake and Josh has always been funny to me. Even now, as an adult, I still go back to Drake and Josh and laugh. Once again, I think my love of just absurd, weird humor, or farce, or whatever you want to call it, just makes Drake and Josh a show that I still find absolutely hilarious. And unlike some Nickelodeon shows, I'm glad this one actually got to have like a pretty satisfying conclusion, because the Really Big Shrimp movie actually wrapped up the series nicely. I know they did do the Christmas movie afterwards, but even then, like, I feel like that still did well without undoing the conclusion. It still looked pretty good, it still did well, and I still enjoyed it. Also was a big fan of Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide. Still am. I mean, this show was definitely pretty fun, pretty smart. Again, I really liked the main three of Ned, Mose, and Cookie. Cookie was probably my favorite of the bunch. And another show that actually had a pretty emotionally satisfying conclusion with its final episode. Even though, you know, hearing the cast basically overshare in the way that they did on their podcast, I like to pretend that they didn't. And then there was a period where I was watching some of, like, the Teen Nick shows, like, that maybe I didn't want to admit to people that I enjoyed. Again, gender roles being a big deal. But I can't pretend I didn't like them. Zoe 101 was an example of that. I watched way more of this show than I probably should have as a kid, but I don't know, I just liked it. I liked a lot of the relationships between the characters. I know it was a show that became quite the topic of media attention at a point because of Jamie Lynn Spears, and there are a lot of things that we could say about her, but I'm going to refrain, of course. I'll just remember that, again, this was a fun show that had a good conclusion to it as well. And yes, when I was younger, I've probably mentioned this in some videos before, and it was something that I kind of never really wanted to admit when I was in like middle school or high school, but yes, as a kid, I was a big fan of the Naked Brothers Band. I know when I mentioned Disney Channel, I didn't talk about Jonas Brothers, and I also didn't watch Big Time Rush on Nickelodeon, so I won't be talking about that, but I was a Naked Brothers Band kid, believe it or not. Actually, you know, you see this, it's a little shorter now, but me even having long hair, really, I never wanted to admit this as a kid, but it was true. The real impetus for that was because of Alex Wolff. I liked Alex a lot, and I wanted to look like him. Of course, my hair would grow way longer and way more out of control than his would, but nevertheless, Alex Wood was my hair inspiration, and also the inspiration in a lot of ways, one of the inspirations, for me becoming a drummer. So, yeah, shout out to Alex Wolff. I'm glad to see he's doing well and getting a lot of big movie roles lately. Pretty cool for him. Also, I can't lie, when it came to Naked Brothers Band, Rosalina, or the actress Ally DeMecco, was actually my first celebrity crush. Like, when I was a kid, I had the biggest crush on Rosalina. Like, yeah, I know, even as a Power Rangers guy, you know, everyone talks about Kimberly being your first celebrity crush, but no, for me, my first celebrity crush was Rosalina. Or whatever. The point is, Ally DeMecco, aka Rosalina, she was the only character in the show, really, who, like, didn't actually use her real name, which was weird. Nat and Alex got to be Nat and Alex, David, Thomas, Kasim, Cooper, all those guys got to be themselves, but for some reason, Ally had to be Rosalina. I mean, Rosalina's a nice name, but so is Ally. But yes, I did enjoy the show, and even some of the music is still actually pretty good for music that was made by a group of like 11 and 12-year-olds. Although this is one of the examples of a show that didn't really have a super strong conclusion because they were supposed to do more of it, but Nickelodeon basically tried to break the contract with Nat and Alex's parents because the parents were like, hey, we want them to still go to school, and Nick wanted to film while they were in school, so it was sad that it ended where it did, but still, I did enjoy it for what it was when I was younger. Of course, iCarly was one that I enjoyed too. Again, another one I didn't want to admit that I enjoyed, but I did like it. Carly and Sam had such incredible chemistry together. Spencer was really funny. I mentioned Crazy Steve with Drake and Josh, so obviously Jerry Trainer was funny. As a kid, I was always someone who wanted Creddy to happen, so I was glad that it did with the reboot. I did watch some of the reboot, mostly just through YouTube clips. I never had Paramount Plus, but I did watch some of it, and it was good. I really like how they handled it, and I really like how, again, it's a bit of a spoiler, but it doesn't really matter. In the reboot, Carly and Freddie did end up together, and I think they handled it very, very well. So, yeah, that did well. Interestingly, this is one that actually came up more in my adult life, but Victorious, I watched some of it when I was younger. Every once in a while, just like, again, younger cousins or like friends of family had it on, so I would watch it. And I remember thinking it was actually pretty decent, but then the show actually came back into my consciousness because there was like a point in 2019 where people, I guess it came to Netflix or something, so people were posting a lot of videos of it on YouTube. So episodes just started popping up on YouTube, and I don't know, I just ended up watching a ton of it. It was one of those things where you click on one video and your entire YouTube recommended is just a bunch of videos of it. So I watched a lot of videos of Victorious, and I ended up actually liking the show quite a lot. Andre's the best character, by the way. Just saying. And yes, that's another show where I did have a celebrity crush after that, because I'm not the only one that will say that thanks to Victorious and just later things that she would go on to do, I did develop a huge celebrity crush on Ariana Grande. And then even though it didn't last very long, I did get some laughs out of Sam and Cat. That was another one I watched in passing when it was on air, and I still thought was pretty funny. And then again, thanks to Victorious, clips from Sam and Cat also started popping up more on YouTube, so I would see clips of it, and it was a pretty fun show. I know it does really stink how Jeanette was treated by the network. It doesn't just stink, it's, you know, unacceptable how she was treated by the network. And again, we can get into a lot of talk about Dan Schneider and the kind of person he was. And I totally validate that some of these shows are pretty hard to go back to because of him and because of that. But the shows themselves are still quality and, you know, good watches. And I definitely think that I was glad to have stuff like this growing up. I don't really have much else of a conclusion, so yeah, I grew up on some good TV. Like I said, I didn't really have much of a theme in this video. This was literally just me rambling about TV shows and cartoons I watched as a kid. You might not see it in the video, but the raw footage is at like an hour and 15 minutes right now, so I gotta get this video wrapped up. So yeah, this was just my opinion on kids' TV shows that I loved. What about you guys? What were some of your favorites? Were they some that I mentioned? What were some of the big ones that I missed? Because I know there were some that I missed. What are some memories you have with kids' shows from the past? Whatever your thoughts, opinions, and experiences are, leave them down in the comments below. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe and support some of my other ventures that I have linked in the description, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I totally understand. And as far as what I have next, I have no idea. I honestly am surprised I could still think straight because I've been sitting in this room for like an hour and a half and I'm sweating. You might not be able to notice it, but I am sweating. It is summertime as of the time that I'm recording this. Although usually I don't like to let this kind of stuff out. I don't like to say what the plan is for future I want to talk about videos, especially since I'm doing more short form content now, but I will let the cat out of the bag. I have been contemplating doing like a video, you know, as we're talking about like old kids TV shows. I have been contemplating doing a video on like old Flash games from my youth, like licensed Flash games and things like that. I have something written down for it, like a little bit, but I'm still deciding if I want to do that video. If you guys are interested in it, I'll definitely give it a try. But given how long this video is already, this will probably take me a minute to edit and put out and stuff like that, so we'll see how I'm feeling when it's done. So stay tuned for that, but until next time, I need to go pass out right now because I am so tired. And I'm so sweaty, and I need to go find something to eat. So, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.